In the previous video, we saw how to use variables with Unity, how they work, what it's for, what are the different types of variables, and how to see them here in the inspector. I'm going to delete the cube, and I'm going to create a new cube on the scene for this video. I go to Game Object, 3D Object, Cube, I'll position it in front of the camera, and I'll create a new script. And this time I'm going to show you the statements. So right-click, create C# script, I'll call it statements, conditions in French. Wait for it to compile as usual. This statement script, we're going to place it here on the cube, and we'll edit it. So statements is like when we speak. We say if this, then that, otherwise, blah, blah, blah. So it's the same thing in programming. If, else if, else. We're going to do that in C#. Statement allows us to test something, to test a value, and according to this value, we can execute something or something else. I'm going to do a simple example. I'll create a Boolean variable, public bool. I'll call it, well, I don't have much idea, so example. There. I save, I go back to Unity. This value appears right here. I have example. I'll put the material test on the cube. This material test, I'm going to change the... Oh, no, I'm going to leave it turquoise. It'll be fine like that. I'll go back to statements. I'll create a public material mat variable. Control S. We saw this in the previous video. It will allow us to store the material of the cube like this. Here. I'll go back to the script, and we're going to make the material dot color equal to, and here I'm not going to use a variable, I'm just going to write color dot red. In fact, the color class is a class that exists in Unity, which allows you to access a lot of predefined colors, red, blue, green, white, yellow, and other classic colors. Here, what I'm saying is that the material must be red. I want to change the color of the materials at the start of the game so that it becomes red. We're going to test it to see if it works. I launch the game, and then the cube turns red, so it works. However, when the material changes color, it stays in the indicate color, so I rectified this immediately. I'll change it back to green. This will be important. I'm going back to my script, and now I'm going to use a statement. So I said if, else, if, or else. I write if example is equal to true, brace, brace, and now I'm going to execute this piece of code here. So what I did, if in brackets, we're going to write our statement. If example is equal to true, so if the value of example is true, you notice that I put a double equal. That's not a typo. Equal by itself means assign this value to this variable. One equal allows you to assign a value, and a double equal allows you to test for equality. I just want to test if example is equal to true. If this is the case, if this is true, we'll carry out everything that's between braces, here changing the color. Control S, I return to Unity. We know that the cube is supposed to become red. The value is false here. I launch the game, and nothing happens. I quit. I check the value example to set it to true. I launch the game, and there the cube becomes red. Here we have an example of a program that runs according to a statement. I go back to green, I go back to my script, and little tip, when you test a Boolean variable, you can just write the Boolean variable. It will work if true or if false, because this value can have either a true or a false value. And if you just write the name of the Boolean variable, it allows you to test if it's true or false. Let's test it. I return here. So my value is checked, is true. I launch the project. And there the cube becomes red. So there you have written your first statement. I go back to my script and I can write an else. Else to say otherwise. If we have a different case, I write color equal blue. We're going to set the color to either red or blue, depending on the value. I'll go back here to check if it works well. I'll change the color of the cube to pink. I'll launch the project. It's red. I change the color. I uncheck the variable, so it's false. I run the project. It's blue. So we did it. We wrote our first statement. Now that you can test an inequality, you can say if different. From example, different is written with an exclamation mark, or we could have written if example is different from equal to true, which means example is equal to false. We just say the opposite. Is it equal to false, or is it not equal to true? These are two different notations. Okay, that was the first example. I'll show you another example. Public int age, and I'm not going to set any value. And here we'll write a statement. I'll write if age is less than 10, I'll do print less than 10. Then I write else if age greater than 50. Print greater than 50. And else, in the opposite case, in the case where neither of the two values is found, I'll display other. We are in another case. But the else if, you can write as many as you want. You can write else if age greater than 25, else if age greater than 20, else if age greater than 15. You can do as many as you like, but here's a simple example. Control S, going back into the game. I'll set an age smaller than 10, like 0. I'll start the game. We'll have a look. I do have less than 10. If I put 60, it's bigger than 50. I run the game. I have greater than 50. And if I put 30, it's neither one nor the other, so it's the default case, which is other. That's how to create a variable with several statements. And we can go even further than that. I'm going to start all over again, so I'll delete all this. We can go further than that. I can say if age is greater than or equal to 25, then I can do a double and here. And that age is less than 100, another double and that example is equal to true. So if I have greater than 25 and less than 100 and example is equal to true, I write print. All statements are true. Let's test it. Go back to Unity. This Boolean value that's on the cube, I set it to true. And I set an age to 20. I launch the game. And nothing happens. I'm going to set it to 25, since I have to be greater than or equal to 25, so that should do the trick. I launch the game. And now I have all statements are true, because we're good. If I uncheck the example and I start again, the statements are not all met, and then we have nothing in the console. So you can do more advanced statements like this, and you can also do if age is greater than 25, and you can say or with a double straight line. That line is called a pipe. You need to find out how to type it on your keyboard because they aren't all the same. So just before it was and means all the statements must be met, but the or means either that or that. If one of the two statements is met, then here we display yes. So either here I have greater than 25 or example equals true. I'm going to test. We'll select the cube here. I set 20 and false. I launch the game. So there is nothing in the console. But as soon as one of the two values is valid, if one of the two statements is valid, we have yes in the console. So we have succeeded in testing a statement with an or, and we also tested with an and. The statements are really the basis of computer science and of all video games. It allows you to do everything. You can test if the player still has life, if so, he's still alive. If not, he has lost. You can test if the player has enough mana to be able to use his magic power. You can test if the player has the key. If key is true, then you can open the door. You can test anything. Statements are the basis of all algorithms in all video games. So it's really something very important that you have to remember and master. To finish, I'm going to show you that you can do nested statements. You can say if age greater than 25, and you can add if example. You can nest statements like that. And we can nest as much as we want. If, I don't know, well, let's say 1 is equal to 1, why not? And then if all the statements are met, greater than 25, true, and 1 is equal to 1, then we should have yes appearing in the console. Let's test it. I'm going to select the cube here. Check, greater than 25, I'll put 28, I test. And now I have yes appearing in the console. So that's what I had to say about the statements. We can do even more complex things, but if you remember that, you remember 90% of the things, and that's really the advice I'm giving you. It's to master 90% of the scenarios that can be presented to you. Because to master the extra 10% will require 100% more effort on your part. So I really say that you have to master 90% of things, which allows you to cover almost all the possibilities you'll be confronted with. And then, if you know how to do your research on the internet, as I showed you, you can manage by yourself to find the few remaining percentages if ever you encounter a very specific case. Here, in this training, I'll try to keep things fairly simple, but still cover most of the things you might have to deal with. And then, for the really special cases, you can do your research on the internet to find the answer to your question. So, like I said, the statements are super important. If you didn't understand this video too well, I encourage you to watch it a second time and practice using statements. Practice doing tests on your own, practice creating variables, setting up statements, changing the color or changing the name of an object. Really manipulate everything we've seen so far. The more you do it, the better you'll remember and assimilate it. It's really important because it's really the elementary notions, you have to master them. And then when you are confident, you can move on to the next part of the training.